Coming to you from the shores of gorgeous Lake Michigan, welcome to the National Writers Series. Celebrating 15 years as a year-round book festival and the premier home for passionate readers who love inspiring conversations with award-winning authors. Tonight, we welcome #1 New York Times bestselling author, Leif Enger. His latest book, I Cheerfully Refuse, follows a grieving widower sailing a climate-ravaged Lake Superior in search of his belated wife. Enger grew up in Osakis, Minnesota, and worked as a reporter for Minnesota Public Radio before writing his debut novel, Peace Like a River, which sold more than 1 million copies and was named one of the year's best books by Time Magazine and Amazon. Our guest host is Doug Stanton, a #1 New York Times bestselling author of In Harm's Way and 12 Strong. Made into a major motion picture by Jerry Bruckheimer and the Odyssey of Echo Company. He created the National Writers Series in 2009 with his wife Anne and attorney Grant Parsons. The National Writers Series salutes our amazing audiences, dedicated volunteers, and generous supporters for helping us raise the next generation of readers and writers through our free education programs across the region. This season of amazing authors is made possible through major support by the Green Brick Foundation, Northgard Technology Group, Golden Fowler Home Furnishings, Prout Financial, and Ward and Mary Bevins Gillette. Tonight's event is underwritten by Dick and Sue Campbell. Tonight's live streaming is exclusively underwritten by Nancy Davey. Thanks to our major media sponsor, the Traverse City Record Eagle, and our media partner, Interlochen Public Radio. For more information on future events, programs, and how to support our nonprofit work, please visit nationalwritersseries.org.
As a writer are equal, and that is true of Leif Enger. He has been a delight. He was kind enough to share his talents today with the Writer Studio at North Ed. If you don't know North Ed on Parsons Road in Traverse City, Michigan, do check it out. It's a wonderful place, and he spoke to Teresa Scollin's writing class there for over an hour, and the students were just superb. They're getting real creative writing instruction. No kidding. And it was just amazing. And so that kind of experience is what your presence here allows us to do. Those students sat in the room, and he came in, and he just started talking about his life experience as a best-selling author, as a citizen, and whatever it was that was coming off of him was going into the room, and you could tell, and it was changing lives. And they went back to their schools. Yes, it was wonderful. It happened to me. It happened to me when I was a young student at Interlochen growing up in Traverse City, which is what this is, that experience inspired us to do the kinds of things we're trying to do in our community and reach a 5-county area. So thank you, Leif, and thank you for your continued support of programs like that. There's not much to say, and I'm going to sit down and talk with Leif. The only thing I want to say in prefatory is that this novel either takes 30 years or 30 minutes into the future. And we're going to talk about what that just might mean and how he came to write this book and talk about his other book, which you haven't read. You could start with Leif Enger by reading Peace Like a River. Has anyone read Peace Like a River? Okay. Everyone ready? Everyone having a good time this week? Anyone have any births in the family? New babies come along? Nobody. I mean, you would think in a town like this, people would be making babies, but they're not. Anyone sell a book? I see my friend Brian Grewley down there in the front row. Brian, raise your hand. There you are. Brian Grewley is a crime writer, moved to Traverse City recently. You might know his work. His new one's called Bitter Frost, and he's going to be on this stage in September, October, I think, with John U. Bacon, who many of you might know as well. So welcome, Brian Grewley, to the town here. All right, without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Leif Enger. Don't you think it's funny that nobody's had a baby recently?
What's going on here?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
What's going on in Duluth?
Yeah. Oh, tons of just babies everywhere.
Babies everywhere in Duluth.
I don't actually know.
Well, listen, thank you so much for being here. You've been a perennial ask for our audiences, really since you were here in 2001.
Yeah.
With the publication of Peace Like a River.
Right. A great trip. I remember a lot of it really clearly. I flew in with Robin between two snowstorms. There was a big dump of 12 or 14 inches. Somebody called me up and said, bring your boots, bring your mucklucks. We did that. At the time, we both had high mucklucks that were made in Ely, Minnesota. And we slipped in hours after one storm and hours before another storm. It was fantastic. It was...
Was your wife, Robin, with you?
She was along, yeah.
Is that what you said? Okay.
Yeah, she came along on that one. She would be here now, except that she had a reunion with some friends that she couldn't miss.
Robin is an important person in your life and your artistic life as well.
Right. Yeah,
she was an early reader, or she is an early reader of most recently the new book, right?
Yeah, she's actually more of a listener because part of my process is, as I'm completing sections, long or short, she will agree to listen to them if I feel confident enough to read them aloud. And then she will be very honest and straightforward about what she thinks.
And what do you do with that information?
Well, I have learned to pay attention to it because, she's usually the one who will say, you are writing that woman all wrong. Or she will say, will you just let them touch each other?
Really?
Will you just let them show some affection? Because I had for many years kind of a strong silent sort of blockage happening. And she would say, no, just let them touch. Come on, be comfortable with each other. I've learned to really respect what she thinks about my work. So she's in.
Tell us about our Cheerfully Refuse as we kind of further this line of questioning, which is, what's it about?
Yeah.
Who are the main characters? Because something happened. And I want to ask you about why you had to rewrite the ending. And I think Robin was part of this.
She was part of this.
Yeah. So what happens in I Cheerfully Refuse?
Yeah, well, the story is, it's a little bit of a dystopian tale set on Lake Superior. When I started it, which was early in the pandemic, I was thinking, well, this is what we might look like in 30 or 40 years. Because democracy has failed. There are 16 trillionaires who own everything.
This is in the novel.
In the novel.
Okay.
So far in the novel.
Okay.
Justice is dispensed not by impartial courts, but by religious zealots with ropes on bridges. There are some dark things in the book. Indentured servitude has made a marvelous comeback. It's become very normalized and is the only way to survive for a lot of people. And the most popular medication that's still available is a suicide pill because people are suffering from despair.
But they don't call it suicide. The drug is called Willow.
It's called Willow. Yeah, it's called Willow. And it's chiefly consumed by people who are young and who cannot see a future for themselves because we have not exercised stewardship over the planet and its resources, and because of the quasi-monarchy, sort of oligarchy that has taken the place of a democratic government. In any case, sounds pretty grim, right?
Is it going to be a musical anytime soon?
Not that I know about, but if it does, I know who's playing bass. Yeah. No,
anyway. I jumped on your line there, but it does sound grim, but I got to tell you, it is not a grim book. It is a terrifying, beautiful, and poignant book, and it does bend towards the light at the end. But amazingly, you're able to kind of subsume these themes within a very compelling narrative, and you don't feel like you're being led anywhere, right?
Well, look, I always write the book that I want to read at the time, and I was feeling a little grim about things in 2020, and I needed a story in which there was someone to whom the worst happens, and to see how he would respond to that. And I had a feeling about Rainey, my narrator, that he would respond in a way that was hopeful, a way that betrayed a certain amount of dark humor in his personality, in a way that might be helpful to me, who was struggling against despair in my own quiet hours.
What was the cause of that despair, Leif?
Well, I think that the pandemic did not help. But also, I felt like we were trending in some dangerous ways. I would like to see democracy preserved. I would like to see clean air and clean water left for my grandchildren to enjoy. That's fairly important to me.
Yeah.
We all feel that way, and to constantly be barraged with a point of view and so many forces arrayed against everything that I value. I needed a way to look at the world that would be hopeful. And I'm not an optimistic person for the sake of optimism. But hope is something that's a little bit different from optimism, I think. It doesn't require quite the same thing. Optimism can go away if your plans are dashed. Hope survives. Hope says we'll find a way through. That's what I wanted to see. Stephen King said something years ago that I thought was great. He said, I spend 150 or 200 pages giving you a character you can really love, and then I throw him into hell and see what happens. I didn't exactly do that, but pretty close. Pretty close. Yeah. And look, I'm still trying to figure out why it was a joyful writing experience, but it really was. I would get up early in the morning, go to my office where it was still dark. I start early, and it was as if Rainey was in there lighting his paraffin lantern and getting ready to tell me a story.
Tell us what the paraffin lantern is.
Well, Rainey spends a good deal of his time because of a thing that happens that I won't spoil for those of you who haven't read it. He spends a lot of time in a small boat on Lake Superior. He, in fact, flees onto Superior into the teeth of a storm in the middle of the night. And the paraffin lantern is his light source below decks. It was something that every time he lit it, I felt kind of lit up. Every time he encountered people, somehow he wasn't just looking for the worst. He always kept kind of hoping for the best, expecting the best. Oftentimes he got it. When he really needed it, he got it. The book was a joy to write. And I wish I could give you a better explanation than that, Doug, but it was a pleasure. It made me feel happy to write this horrific story.
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, so many of us were paralyzed during that time,
right?
Psychologically, financially, et cetera.
Yeah.
And you had somehow the wherewithal to turn it into something positive. I mean, I could see other writers. Somebody said they had writer's block; they couldn't create out of that.
Right.
And reading enough about you, that what's so fascinating, Leif, about you is you need a story to live by in a way. Like you find the story, like as you said today in class,
right.
The language is like a flashlight.
Yeah.
And you're finding your way with it. That's just really, I feel like I'm learning something about the writing process by hearing that from you.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a survival mechanism, I think, Doug. And it continues to be. I've talked with a lot of writers who are kind of having difficulty, even at this moment, post-pandemic. There's so much uncertainty in the world that it's easy to feel some paralysis, especially at work, and especially when a book takes so long to create. You don't know what the world is going to look like in another 18 months or 36 months, however long. But I found that, at least for me, it's like the opposite has been true. I get up in the morning and I sit down with a notebook, and the words, for better or worse, just come piling out of my fingertips.
Do they really? I mean,
they do.
Do you hear those words? Do you see those? Dream them?
No, they just come out of my fingers onto the paper. And look, most of these you'll never see because most of the words I write are garbage. it just takes it takes a lot of bad words to condense down into a few beautiful and good words. But I'm happy to do that. I mean, it's a lovely creative process.
You practice something called The Morning Pages by Julia Cameron in her book, The Artist's Way, and you speak very highly of that process, right? I mean, explain, what is that?
So Julia Cameron, I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago, wrote a book called The Artist's Way. It's not just for writers, but most of the people I know who use her methods are writers. And she advocates getting up in the morning, and before you do anything else, before you make coffee, says Julia, but not me, I make the coffee first, and I find that it doesn't impinge anything. But Julia says, spend 30 minutes with an ink pen and like a legal pad or any notebook you have on hand, and write 3 pages in longhand as fast as you can. And it doesn't matter what you're writing. It doesn't matter if you're writing a weather report, or if you're trying to get to the bottom of a character for your next novel. Whatever it is, you're just writing as fast as you can. You're not paying attention to diction. You're not paying attention to punctuation. None of the rules apply. It's your morning pages. No one except you is ever going to see them. So what that does, I find, is almost magically, it loosens up whatever muscle it is that allows you to write decent prose. It frees your imagination. It's a lovely thing to do, and it makes you feel like you're capable of something. And by the time Robin comes down in the morning, I'm done with my pages, and I'm on to whatever I'm writing. And so it used to be, before I found out about this, that I would get up and I'd struggle, the famous struggle with the blank page. And that can be terrifying. But if you practice the morning pages, it's just way less likely. I'm far less often blocked than I used to be.
So the pages are on a notebook, but what you're working on in your manuscript is different.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the pages are just in a notebook, but sometimes there's overlap. Sometimes if I'm working out plot details or character things, then I'll refer to the pages when I start in on the, with the MacBook Pro. I also own a few typewriters now, but
do you have a Hermes typewriter?
I do, yeah.
Yeah,
I have a Hermes Rocket, which is the portable one.
Yeah.
I don't have the 3000.
Do you type on it?
I do. I use it for letter writing.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a friend who got me into this.
Mm-hmm.
He saw a documentary called American Typewriter.
With Tom Hanks?
Tom Hanks is in it.
Yeah.
A bunch of other people are in it.
This is a very nerdy part of the conversation. If you want to come back later.
It is very nerdy, but I got to admit, I had missed the feel of the keys. And here's what I love about it, and here's why I write letters on it. First, I like the tactile feel of the keys. I like the sound that it makes. But more than that, I like that it doesn't report to anyone where it is. Well, it doesn't know about the cloud. It doesn't know about electricity. And so it's very nice to sit down and write a letter to someone, and if I make a typo, I X it out. My letters are ugly. But I think people sort of enjoy getting them because they're kind of old school, and there's something nice about holding a piece of paper in your hand that isn't a pre-printed bill. Yeah.
So, what's the question that I Cheerfully Refuse, your novel, asks of this time, this moment? Because you set out, ostensibly, you're trying to solve a problem here, and what is it?
What does the novel ask? I suppose it asks what we're willing to do for our people, among other things. In the future that Rainey inhabits, there is no social safety net. That's gone.
Describe the environments where he's living for us. I mean, what's working and what's not working?
Yeah. He lives up the North Shore, say an hour or a little bit more from Duluth, in a town called Icebridge, which doesn't really exist. But what's working up there is the sense of a sense of community in small towns. The neighbors kind of look after each other. There are places you can buy groceries and bread. The roads are in terrible shape, and sometimes they wash out because of the floods. And when that happens, then, a few nearby adults who used to be in former lives civil engineers or loggers, and they still have their skidders, they'll drag these things out of the woods and repair a roadway the best they can. But you just can't drive on it going more than 20 or 30 miles an hour. There are remnants. There are remnants. Once in a while, Lark, who runs a used bookshop at a time when books are a dangerous enterprise to be involved with, Lark will drive very slowly and carefully down the road to Duluth in order to buy the private library of someone who has recently died. And that is how she keeps her used bookshop in inventory.
So who is Lark, and what's the relationship with Rainey? Because this is central to the novel.
Lark is the girl Rainey met when he was 28, and needed to use the library, not because he was going to check out any books. He didn't read at that time, but because he needed a warm place to eat a cheese sandwich he had in his pocket. And so he went into the library to do it. And while there, he heard a woman's beautiful voice. She's at the help desk, assisting people with whatever it is they've come to be helped with. And he hears this kind voice, and he begins to fall in love before he ever sees her, because she is so decent to people, and she intuits what they need from her. If they're asking about a particular kind of a book, and this is a flashback in the novel. They're both younger when this happens. Books are still something that people occasionally read, and what she'll do is she'll recommend history for people that she intuits are ambitious, poetry for the lonely, novels for the heartbroken, so on and so forth. And she knows what people need. She actually, I was thinking about a great old Ann Tyler novel called Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant. Some of you have read that. And there's this character who, or this idea, I don't remember exactly who it is, but I remember the idea of a restaurant where you go and you sit down and they bring you exactly what it is that you need. There's not a menu. They just bring you what you need. That spoke to me so much when I read it, and I've carried it kind of in my pocket ever since, waiting for a chance to break out my version of it. And I see Lark as that sort of person, an intuitive and caring person.
So was this a sense of wish fulfillment? I mean, in some ways, the novel is delivering to you what you need personally at that moment.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, guilty as charged. Yeah.
Was that a new experience for you in the 4 novels you've written?
No, I do it every time. If there's something I badly want in my life or I need, or I just love and I can't stop thinking about, all of my obsessions just go instantly into my story.
What are your obsessions?
Oh, sailing, kite flying, bass playing.
Sailing, kite flying, and bass playing.
Anything having to do with wind. Wind feels like a language. It's like the world is trying to get your attention. I love it. I write about it in every way I can.
Talk about kite flying a moment, because it's important, I think, in your life, as you said in this book. I mean, you, in fact, I'll let everyone know, you said, Doug, he said to me, Doug, you know that I travel with a kite.
Yeah.
And is there anywhere I can fly a kite in Traverse City? And I said, well, of course.
Yeah.
So you have a habit of flying a kite.
I do. Yeah, I do. Look, a kite, I started when I was a teenager, and I was a nerdy teenager, and I wasn't good at sports.
It was a guy named Dave, right? Dating your sister?
Yeah, Dave brought me a kite. He came to see my sister. He wasn't dating her. I mean, he thought he was, but she knew he wasn't.
She said, go fly a kite, Dave.
Yeah. So he brings this kite to me, and he's like, he was one of these guys who, look, he was a hippie. It was the early 70s, and I thought he was fabulous. I didn't see why Liz didn't want to go out with him, because he he said cool, and he said man, and I thought he was just great. He was so kind to me. He was so nice. And he showed up driving this convertible where the top wouldn't come up. It was just permanently down. So rain or shine, he just drove. The car was named Fanny, and he drove Fanny up, and he had a plastic kite I'm sure he had bought at the Holiday Station, for 59 cents or whatever, but I thought it was the best. It had a pterodactyl on it. It was bright green. And he said, this is a fabulous kind of kite, and you're going to really love it. And then just because I thought Dave was cool, kite flying kind of became my thing. And so I started then getting kind of honestly obsessed, and I would build paper kites and fly them, trying to break. At that time, there was a record in the Guinness Book, and a kite had to be in the air for, I don't know, I forget what it was, 89 hours. It was under 100 hours at that time to claim the world record, and I thought, I can do this. So I built a kite according to the plans made by a guy named Will Yolen, who was the father of the author Jane Yolen. And every time I put that thing in the air, I was tuning up for the big marathon, right? And I would write down on the paper kite how many hours it had been in the air. So it was like 20 hours, 30 hours, 37 hours. And I was getting better and better. And finally, I had the wind I thought I would need. You don't have to be there flying it. I just tied it to a tire and put it out on the ice on Lake Osakis. And I thought, it'll just fly forever. But the most I ever got was like 59 hours. Still pretty good, but I never broke the record or came close.
Well, you also have a habit of sometimes putting a little camera up on the kite, and it will take a picture back.
Yeah, I sometimes do that, right?
Yeah. If you haven't seen Leif's Instagram account, it's really fascinating. But your dad built kites too, right?
He did, yeah. Dad,
big ones.
He would build these big kites out of butcher paper and pieces of flexible wood that were like an inch by a half inch. I mean, these were really big spars. And the kites they were very heavy, and they would fly at a very low angle. And we would fly them in North Dakota, where Dad came from, and they would fly just, they might be 1,000 feet out and 20 feet off the ground. And they would pull so hard and they were so powerful that I would just not be able to hold them. And Dad would laugh, and he'd hang on to them because he was a man, right? And I was a kid. But I did love it and think it was magic. And then I noticed a funny thing when I was in my teen years, which was that if I went off by myself and was just alone, my mom would kind of worry about me. But if I went off kite flying by myself, Mom thought it was great. So it was like license. It was license to daydream. It was license to put my ear against the string and hold it up against that little flap on your ear and realize that there's a beautiful humming sound, like an actual note.
This is real.
This is real. And it'll come down the string, and you can only hear it if you put your ear right against the string. But then it's very lively and very pure, and it's like when you rub your finger around the edge of a wine glass, and it makes that beautiful humming sound. That's how a kite string does the exact same thing.
This is so much. It could be a scene in one of your novels.
Oh, yeah.
The sense of attention and intention.
Right.
That you devote both to language and to sensing the world. The thing about your writing, Leif, is just so vivid. There are lines in there that just knocked me out. I kept looking for it in one of the books. The guy is wearing rimless glasses, and you describe him as having hair like a mink. And when I read it, it just knocked me out. Like I said, how? And there's another line in this book where you're describing lights in a hallway, and it looks like lanterns in a photograph. How does this stuff come to you? These images, this language?
Well, I don't know. I'm not even a very good observer, really, most of the time. But sometimes I notice something that kind of stands out. And Mary Oliver wrote beautifully about paying attention and the attention that becomes devotion. And when I remember that, I don't always remember it. When I remember it, then I try to pay close attention. And sometimes if I'm a little stuck on a chapter, I'll just drive. I live 7 blocks up the hill from Lake Superior. And so it's easy to get in the car and go down to the beach. And the beach is rocky, and sometimes it's violent, and the water is always cold. And sometimes I'll just go down and put my hands in the lake, just put them in the water until I can't do it anymore, and that kind of wakes me up, and it brings me back, and it makes me pay attention. I really like paying attention, but it's a discipline for me. I don't do it automatically.
Talk more about, we're not done with kite flying because I think it's so fascinating. There's your novel, Virgil Wander.
Yeah.
He flies kites.
Right.
There's a fellow named Rune who comes to town.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that you went to Norway once and perhaps were inspired to create Rune. Is that...
Well, sure. I mean, Rune was in my head all along before I went to Norway, but it was really fun to go to the place where my people came from many years ago.
Where was that?
It was in the Hemar district, not far out of Oslo, maybe 90 minutes out of Oslo. And none of my family had ever been back. My brother Lynn had been back to Norway a couple times, but that was before any of us knew where the old farmstead was. But when I went, the records had been digitized. And so the Norwegian publisher that brought out Peace in Norwegian did some research for me, and they found the old Enger farmstead, and then they drove me out there when I got to Oslo. And it was all this time I had been thinking, well, look, in order for Ole to come to the States in 1893, things must have been pretty hard in Norway. And so I imagine a farm of 35 acres, a vertical hillside full of rocks, a couple of goats. I was imagining, a very, very hard situation. And instead, the farm was 300 acres of bottomland on the Glomma River with mountains visible in the distance on 3 sides. And I got to it, I got out of the car, and I said, well, thanks, Ole, for coming to North Dakota. It was like this moment of grief. I stood by the Glomma River and thought, this could have been mine. I could have been a Norwegian farmer. Sounded pretty good, but no, I mean, it was hard in other ways, I think, for Ole there.
So Rune, the character,
Yeah.
comes from the old country, and let's talk about Virgil Wander in a minute, because it also brings Robin back into the story.
Yeah.
He teaches, so who's Virgil? Tell us what happens in that novel, because people should read that one
Sure.
too.
Virgil is a man in a town that is a neighboring town to the one in here called Greenstone, and he owns an old, kind of decrepit movie theater in the pre-digital age. So he is spooling up movies, and it's a passion for him. It's kind of his love. It's what he does for the community that he's in. And he started this thing. This is something that, like I said, whatever I really want, I put into a book. It's like I'm trying to make it happen. And it only ever happens for my characters. It doesn't happen for me. But in Virgil, I wrote that, at a time when Robin and I were both feeling kind of lonely. Our kids had grown up and gone off. And we lived on a, fairly remote acreage in Aiken County, Minnesota. And we were feeling very separate, very isolated. And so I wrote into that book that what Virgil does is after there's a showing, he'll sometimes just go up and he's got a cache of movies in the upstairs of the theater, and he'll bring down a print of, Lawrence of Arabia or whatever it is, and he'll put it on, and he will have invited 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 people who are close friends, and everybody brings a dish, and everybody brings a bottle of wine, and they sit down and they have a showing just for themselves, because I thought that would be pretty much heaven on earth, wouldn't it? You've got your own theater, and you have all these friends who care about you. and look after you when things are difficult. And you look after them by doing this. So I remember at one point I was reading to Robin, and she said, "What do we have to do to get those friends?" I didn't have an answer for her. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Kind of fun.
But you moved to Duluth. We'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you have some of that now.
Oh, yeah, we do. I mean, finally, Robin said, we need to move to a place where we can have neighbors. And for a long time, when I was younger, I defined myself almost as a man who, sort of a Pa Ingalls. You don't want to see the smoke from the neighbor's chimney. And if you see somebody's smoke, it means it's time to move west. And I had a little bit of that antisocial thing in my head. But by the time we moved, it had become necessary for us to be around some people, and we have loved it. It's been one of the best things we've done.
So Virgil one night though drives off a cliff.
He does, yeah,
into Lake Superior and loses his memory.
Yes, he does. That's how the book begins.
It's what's so beautiful, Leif, is these movies, and again, it's kind of a wish fulfillment. The freight of the cargo is the story being freighted into the theater,
right,
for all to see.
Yeah.
Answering whatever needs they might have in that moment.
Right.
It's really a beautiful way to think about one's artistic gifts.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, he goes off, he loses his memory, and what that story really is something that I felt in desperate need of at the time, which was just a second chance. Virgil needs a second chance. And he finds.
Why did you feel that way, though? Did you feel you needed a second?
I desperately needed a second chance. I had just been through a thing, which was I got meningitis, and so suddenly I would break into a fever of you go from normal to 103, just really fast. And I remember feeling like I'd been clubbed and not knowing what it was. It was hard to diagnose. I was in the hospital. I was in several hospitals that couldn't figure out what it was until finally at Abbott Northwestern, I encountered a doctor who just said, well, I'm going to figure this out. I don't care how long it takes. I'm going to figure this out. And he did. He figured it out. They sent blood out daily to just labs all over the country until they got their answer. And when I came back from that, I think that there was damage. There was damage to my memory. There was damage to the functioning of my mind and how quickly it worked, because I couldn't even think about writing for 3 or 4 months. And then when I opened up my laptop, just before I got sick, I had finished a draft of Virgil Wander.
Okay.
And when I opened it up to see how it was, I read it in horror. I had written a bad book. I didn't like to admit it, but I had to admit the book didn't work. And I was frantic because I thought, well, what if my mind doesn't come all the way back? What if I was a little too young to say, well, I guess I'll just be a retired guy. And I was too old to, go to the work for the post office, which I've always sort of thought is a good backup for me. I still think you could do way worse than be a walking mailman, right? I'd love to do that. That's a great sounding job. You walk all day, you stay in great shape, you get to hand people mail that they want. Wow, that's a great job. So, but I knew that I couldn't get a job at the post office at that age and in the condition I was in. So I needed a second chance. I needed a second chance. I threw that book away and wrote it again with a different cast of characters and in a different voice. And that's when that injury came into the story, because I felt like I was working at a brain deficit because of my illness.
How many pages did you throw away?
440.
Take us to that night, that moment when you hit delete. What were you feeling?
Well, I felt dread until I pressed the button, and then I felt relief. But just so that everyone is straight about this, I actually did go to my wife and tell her that I thought I had to rewrite the book. And if she had said, I think that's a terrible idea. It's better than you think. You can repair the one you have. Don't throw it away. I probably would have tried it because I trust her judgment. But instead she said, do what you have to do. What I did then was I didn't delete it right away. Instead, I came up with a different plan and I started writing it in a different voice. I love the first person voice. It's so immediate. It feels like the most natural way for me to tell a story. Even though I love reading other people's novels that are written from a variety of points of view, that's a very elegant construction and I admire it. And that's what I had tried to do with the first draft of what became Virgil.
It was in the third person.
Yes, from multiple viewpoints.
Wow.
And I really did enjoy trying that. But then when I went back and read it in my, different state of mind, it didn't work for me at all.
That had to be a fraught moment because you'd just thrown away 5 years worth of work, right?
Yeah.
And did she say something like, be free like a kite or go?
Well, no, I mean, she did say something a little like that. I mean,
Be the kite?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I mean, it was, I forget exactly what it was, but it was something like that. But I mean, look, she did have to come to some peace about it. And I don't think that was the easiest, it wasn't automatic. She had to think it through. And she did say, on several different novels, when I was struggling early on, she just said, look, just swing hard. Just take the biggest swing you possibly can. I'm like, what if this thing wouldn't really happen in real life? What if there's a little magic required for this? And she said, then use magic. I make her sound frustrated. She probably was. I can be a frustrating guy. But she did give me real gracious license to hit delete. And once I had written about 20 pages in the new voice, in Virgil's voice, then I felt some confidence because he was telling the story. I loved how he was telling the story. And I felt, okay, here's a voice that I can sustain for however many pages I have to. I felt like he had really deep wells and he wasn't going to let me down. So then I felt free. And after I'd hit delete, I went out and danced in the yard.
Did you really?
I really did. It was a cold night.
Were you by yourself out dancing in the yard?
Robin stayed in the house.
Yeah. Was there music?
No,
just
in here.
Just in your head, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I like that.
Yeah. No, that was a good moment for me.
Yeah. That was a victory.
But it was a lot better moment when the book actually got done.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Was it another 2 years after that?
Yeah, another 2.5 years.
So you published Peace Like a River, and I didn't realize this at the time, but it came out on September 11th, 2001.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
One of the worst days for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
Talk about that. What I want to ask you is, what was the world that you wrote Peace Like a River in? And what was the world that it actually was published in?
Man, that is such a good question because, look, it came out on 9/11, but a nearby bookstore to where we lived at the time had gotten a couple of cases of early copies, and they got permission from Grove to do a launch party the night before. So I launched it on 9/10.
Oh, wow.
Into that previous world. The launch was done at a bar in Nisswa, Minnesota, and those people didn't know what was happening because there'd never been a book launch in this bar before, and so suddenly I came in and sort of set up a music stand to read from, and they thought I was going to play music. They were. And instead I started reading and people were like, what's happening? But it was kind of great. And I discovered something really valuable, which is always read if there's alcohol around because people are already on your side. They're ready to like you. They're ready to be up for whatever it is that you're reading. So they were fantastic. But really, that previous world, it was, I don't know, it's easy to say that it was innocence and experience, the difference. But it genuinely was. I mean, that was such a shock to the system. It was like being punched in the face when you don't know it's coming. And then after you get punched, you're like, oh, now what do we do? You're paralyzed for a while. And so nobody understood. I remember I couldn't get a hold of Grove Atlantic. They were in New York. Phones were out. I had no idea if they were okay. I couldn't reach anybody. It was at least a week before anybody was able to reach me.
So all signs pointed to utter failure for this book.
Yeah, sure.
Out of the gate.
Yeah.
It went on to sell over 1 million copies. You actually did go on a tour with your family, if I remember correctly, a driving tour.
A driving tour. Do you remember what it was like flying after 9/11? You'd go to the airport and you'd just wait in line for 3 hours. I mean, it was miserable. And also there was a sense of real unease and frustration and pent-up anger. And I remember talking to my publisher and saying, I don't know if this is going to work. Maybe I shouldn't do a tour. I don't know if I feel good about selling books right now anyway. And they're like, okay, but we actually put a lot of money into you. So would you please go and try to sell the book? So I thought I better do it. So they then rented me a Jeep Cherokee and I took my family of 4. We drove all over the country. I think we went 10,000 miles in 30 days.
You flew, if I remember right, you flew kites in 21 cities in 31 days.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
That is an amazing thing.
Yeah, it was.
It's like a big middle finger to the bad juju of the world.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, we just did it in order to do something fun while on the road. The kids were, they were little, and it's hard on a kid to spend all day in the car, and then you navigate by your MapQuest printout through whatever town and whatever city, and Robin was the navigator, and she's like, turn here. I'm like, which way? It was hair raising, but it was also really a lot of fun. And we went to these booksellers, and what we found is that the booksellers were like waiting for us with like cocoa and for the kids and for donuts. And it was like people were preparing the way. Deb Seeger, who is the publicist I've always worked with at Grove, would get in touch with the bookstore and say, well, it's the whole family and they're going to come in. The bookstore people would be waiting with like pizza. They were so incredibly welcoming. And sometimes there were people at the bookstore and it felt like a reunion, even though all of us were strangers. And other times there was just like nobody there at all. I remember going to that great bookstore in San Francisco, a clean, well-lighted place. And there was nobody there except there were 4 people, and I realized as I was reading that 2 of them worked for the bookstore. And then one of them left. And the only person left was this sweet lady who was in a wheelchair, and she was right close to me, and I was reading just to her, and finally I thought, why am I standing here like a moron? So I just sat down in a chair next to her. She was very hard of hearing. She could really barely hear me, and so I was shouting, reading to her from Peace Like a River, and then after, I don't know, I was wearing my voice out. Finally, she reached over and tapped my knee and said, young man, you read very well. It was one of the best stops I had on the entire trip. Robin had not come along that night. She and the boys had stayed back in whatever motel we were in, and I got back to it, and she said, how was it tonight? I'm like, it was fantastic. There were these great things that just kept happening.
What did you like about it? How did it make you feel?
Well, what was fun was just this woman's goodwill and just her patience in being there when there was nobody else, and the booksellers, just sort of humoring us both It was nice.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed it. Of course, it's fun when there's people. That's affirming, and who doesn't love some affirmation? But also, there were so many times when I would get just a few people, and 6 or 8 or 10 people, and we would just pull the chairs in close. We'd have, I'm kind of, believe it or not, I'm kind of an introvert, like most writers are, and I was surprised to find reserves of sort of gladness and goodwill, and people were so encouraging. It was a magnificent experience. It was cool. I've enjoyed my tours.
What is that book about? Book about miracles?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's a story. It's a prodigal son story, kind of.
Trying to figure out what it was, because it resonated with America. It spoke to something we needed in September 12th, 2001.
Yeah,
what do you think that was?
I think that's true. I mean, the timing turned out to be pretty good because the story is, for one thing, look, the story is quite good-hearted. The story is very welcoming to the reader, and it's about a family in the Midwest in Minnesota in 1962, just on the verge of, Vietnam is not really a problem for us yet, so that's not really part of the story. It's a period of relative innocence, but there are bullies. There are bullies in this story, and they break into this house, and the older brother, who is just brooking no twaddle, actually shoots these bullies down in their house, and he is arrested for murder. But before he can be put on trial, he breaks jail and runs. And so it's an outlaw story, and there is an obsession again. I love an outlaw tale. I love a fugitive story. They're always exciting to me, and the scenery is always changing, and there's so many ways it can be just quite gripping. And so it's a story about that brother and the family that decides to go and try to find him because they think they know where he's headed out in North Dakota. So it's that, and then it's a story of the narrator, who is the younger brother of the boy who has run, and he has debilitating asthma, and his father is a man who occasionally finds himself a conduit for miracles. Magnificent, unexplainable things happen through his fingertips, but he can't do the one that he most wants, which is to heal his son.
What kind of miracles happen to him?
Kind of crazy little inconsequential miracles. Like there's a traveling salesman that always shows up there in time for supper. And, only the dad can tolerate this guy. The kids are all like, oh, no, it's Tim Lurvy again. He's going to eat all our food. And they don't have much money. The dad is a janitor at the school. But he makes a pot of soup. He makes a pot of their favorite soup, which is made with potatoes and fish. And it's a little bit like the feeding of the 5,000, right? I played a little bit with that, and Tim Lurvy eats bowl after bowl after bowl, and yet there's still more. There's always more. It's miracles like that. They tend to be quite personal and insignificant. I like the idea that most miracles are things that we never see. I don't know if that's true or not, but it might be. Things that wouldn't make any headlines. That's appealing to me.
Can you talk about how faith has worked in your life, both pre 9/11? Because I think that year of 2000, 2001 is a tipping point for you. You go through some changes, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Spiritually, personally.
Sure, yeah.
Certainly professionally with the success of this book.
Yeah.
Because this book, it has a lot of faith in it, and I think
it does.
You told me, you told the class today that every day because your son had asthma until age 17.
Yeah.
That you prayed every day that he would get better.
I did.
Did you believe that would work when you did that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I really had what you would call faith. I think I was throwing everything at the wall. I was hoping and praying for a miracle because his asthma was so bad that we ended up in the emergency room many, many times. And then they would bring him back from the brink and they'd send him home and we would be as careful as we knew how to be. and then it would happen again. It was terrifying. It was, if any of you have been through it, you know what it's like. And so I was, of course, praying for a miracle, and I had seen what I took to be miracles, and so I imagined that maybe one would happen. And
I mean, previous to that, you'd seen miracles,
yeah,
in your life.
Well, I had seen one. I had seen one.
What was that?
Which was a thing that happened when I was 12, and my sister was in a car accident and had a broken back. And then she was in a wheelchair and could not walk, couldn't stand. And then she was prayed for by, not by a pastor or a televangelist or anyone who was in the ministry at all, but a woman from a farm in a neighboring county who asked Mom and Dad, "Can I pray for your daughter?" And they said, "Sure." And she did. And the next morning, my sister got up and her back had fused. The break had essentially healed itself. And so she ran up and down the hall. And this, I mean, it was, I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what to make of that. But it was inexplicable. And I thought, if the inexplicable can happen once, maybe it can happen here. It didn't. He did eventually grow out of the asthma, like so many children do. But it was that, the idea of a father who can do miracles except for the one that he most wants, struck me as a good dramatic kind of a tension point that you could build a story around. So I did that. But yes, I was very invested in the idea of miracles and of spirituality. It was fun to write about it in a way that was respectful, in a way that did not belittle or make light of things that actually happen to living people. So, I mean, that was important. But post 9/11,
you felt a shift.
I felt a shift. I felt a shift just inside and outside too. I think there was something different about the country after that, and there was something different about me. I became a little less, a little less naive, which I don't think hurt me. I think I retained a certain amount of joy and pleasure, in part just because writing itself had become by then such a joyful part of my life that whatever I wrote about seemed to be infused with a certain kind of light or pleasure. I was a much more certain believer before that than I became after. Certainty now has almost been weaponized, I think, to the point where if somebody is absolutely dead certain about their spirituality, I say, "Good for you. I'm going to step away." I fear certainty. I feel like certainty has become a dreadful American disease.
Which brings us back to I Cheerfully Refuse.
Yeah.
Right. We've come full circle in a way to the narrator of that book. It's interesting just thinking here now. Narrator of A Peace Like a River expects the miracle to come from the outer world. It could happen to him or her. And I Cheerfully Refuse, it's almost as if this narrator is creating his own miracle by the language he is speaking into the page or into the story. He's creating the new reality because it's a different kind of tone. It's a different kind of language. It's beautiful, by the way. It's just beautiful.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, I didn't really see it that way, but I can understand what you're saying. I think
he is his own miracle. He's realized that we have to create our own miracles now in this new world. Which, by the way, I want to paint this. I mean, you said there are 16 trillionaires.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the medicine ship? Let's just get to
the
dark heart of this, which he is reacting to.
Right.
What is that?
Okay, so this is an economy that is run by 16 people who own everything. One of the things that they own is the pharmaceutical industry, which has devolved a bit from what we know. There are a series of medicine ships, which were once used as kind of mercy ships, as we sometimes see in the Great Lakes. But what those have become under the auspices of the trillionaires are floating laboratories where compliance drugs are developed and tested on people who are desperate enough to sign up to be tests for.
Why would they sign up? For money?
In order not to starve to death.
Oh.
Yeah, in order to live or in order to supply money to their people back on shore.
What's the feral compendium index?
The feral comportment. That is something that is, it's a way children are measured to see how compliant they are or are not. If you're 5 or above, you might be trouble on the FCC. But no, the medicine ships are places of horror and places of slavery and places of torment. And Rainey finds himself aboard one and a prisoner on one without due process. I might add, there's no way for him to appeal his situation. He finds himself there. He finds himself imprisoned. He makes his way onto the crew that is in charge of painting different parts of the ship to keep it from corroding and sinking. And so he makes his way. But even on the ship, what happens for Rainey is that he meets the people he needs to at the right time. Part of it is simply that he is of the kind of mindset that people gravitate to him in a way, I think. Not everyone means him well, but in that situation, a surprising number of them do.
He's never cynical.
Yeah.
He's never vindictive, and he is gracious to his own tormentors in a way, which actually serves him well in the end. Somehow it gets him out of this jam, When I started the book, one thing I had in my head was, that part of the Old Testament where David, the shepherd boy, becomes kind of a comforter to Saul, the raving king. There are several scenes where David is playing the lyre or the harp and soothing Saul, who is kind of going mad. He's being tormented by his demons. And I've always kind of loved those scenes. They are filled with so much drama and so much potential and so much grace. And so I right away when I conceived of those terrible ships, I imagined Rainey having like a David-like relationship with Warwick. He has an electric Fender bass.
Yes, that's right. He doesn't play the lyre. He plays.
You play too.
Yeah. He plays a 5-string Fender Jazz, and I like the idea of a bass. You know what a bass sounds like. You can barely hear it. You feel it in your chest more than you hear it with your ears. The notes kind of land on you. And there's better bass players than I can play beautiful riffs. But Rainey is a little like me. He plays slowly and intuitively and very simple melodies. He can play, 12-bar blues all day long. Don't ask him to play much jazz. He's not going to be able to do it. But I loved when I am practicing the bass, it's very soothing to me. Just those low tones and the reliable sort of thumping, percussive low tone that reverberates inside of your being, inside of your chest. That's very soothing to me. Robin has said it was soothing to her in totally other parts of the house because it sort of comes through the radiators. It makes its way through the walls. A bass is a little bit, it's invasive. It gets into things. And I'm talking way too much about the bass.
No.
But
it's all about the bass. It's all about the bass.
Yeah. So it's, I really wanted to see if I could make that into something that would have a little bit of magic for a personality as as twisted and nasty and vindictive as Warwick's.
Warwick is a character. We're going to go to questions in just a moment, but before I do, I want to ask you, about the role of myth in your writing.
Sure.
Because basically you've just retold the Orpheus myth here.
Right.
And then thinking about it here, sitting and listening to you, the whole idea that telling a story is music to soothe the soul.
Right.
That itself is a balm.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating theme I think you're always working with, and so appealing. But were you thinking of Orpheus? And tell us who Orpheus, if you were.
Yeah, Orpheus. I reread a couple translations of the Orpheus mythology before I started the book because I knew I wanted to work that in. But Orpheus is the great musician who loses his wife and pursues her to the underworld to get her back. It's one of the most beautiful stories. And of course, what happens to Orpheus is that he gets to the underworld. He finds the trapdoor, he finds the cavern that leads to it, and he gets there, and the lords of the underworld are there, and he charms his way past them. He tells them what he wants, and they say, well, you're a living man. You can't come down here and bring somebody back. And he says, how about if I play you a song? And so he plays, and they're so charmed by it that they say, all right, okay, go ahead. And if you find her, yeah, you can bring her back, but here's the deal. She has to follow you back out, but don't you turn around and look. You can't turn and look at her, or you'll never see her again. So you see what's going to happen. He finds her. She's a little different now. She's a little different in the underworld. She's not quite the same Eurydice that he remembered, but he figures if I just get her back above ground, everything will be okay with time. She'll become herself again. And he says, follow me out. So she starts to follow him out. But when he's just about back to the outer world, suddenly he realizes he can't hear her. He can't hear her footsteps anymore. And he thinks, I haven't heard them in a while. And he turns around and he sees her just fading away. It's a great tragedy. It's a lovely story. I really wanted to use it. The old stories are still so lively. They still win. They still kind of get in and I was an English major in college, and I had a number of teachers that would just stand up and tell you this story in their own language, and they were like lit from inside when they were telling these stories, and I've never forgotten it. So now I try to do them a little bit of honor when I write a book.
Sure, that's Rainey's journey in a way. We won't go too deeply into it, but also it's thinking about that. Here is a woman kind of undone by the male gaze.
You're right. Yes.
Doomed by it.
In every possible way.
Yeah. I'm not going to go, we won't go into work. We're going to have them buy the book. He is an embodiment of the underworld. The way you describe these people in such tactile, physical detail, which is both mythological and so totally real. I was just.
Well, he's quite devilish. Warwick is. He's an underworld figure for sure.
He hasn't slept for either 17 or 42 years.
Yeah, it turns out to be 42. And here's what was really fun about that. I had endured by then just enough insomnia to realize what a hell it would be never to sleep again. And so I.
Just because of the meningitis?
Yeah, it was after that. I had a hard time sleeping after. I still do often have a hard time sleeping, but so I put Warwick in there, which gave me a lot of sympathy for him that he hadn't slept all this time. But then the sort of mythological part of that character is Rainey's trying to figure out why can't you sleep? What is it? Is it a medical condition? And he said, no, I traded it away. I made a trade. He traded his sleep for some revenge that he needed at the time. And that's something you can't do in real life for the most part. Not in a very literal way, but it's something Warwick pulled off. Who did he make that deal with? I'd like to know more about it myself. But that was fun. He traded it for revenge, and Rainey says, was it a good trade? And he goes, oh yeah, revenge is very nourishing. Yeah. It was, I had more fun writing this. You know, I mean, it's a dark book. It should have been my least fun book to write.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it more than anything else I have done.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's actually a healthy way to kind of frame this this moment. You know. And by the way, so Rainey begins to play his Fender jazz bass for him as David did for Saul, and that's kind of a plot point in the
right. It is.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Listen, before we go to questions, do you have something that you could read for us here?
Oh, yeah.
Just send us out,
yes.
And then we'll bring the lights up, and you can ask Leif some questions. Oh wow, look, what a great crowd!
So I'll read this little part here about Lark's bookstore. Lark has a used bookstore at a time when having a bookstore can get you pipe bombed.
And she's his love. She's the love of.
She is the love of his life.
Right, okay.
Yes, she is. Man, I enjoyed writing her. So this is kind of how she started her used bookshop. It was called Bread, the shop, because it started as a bakery. It was the best place in Icebridge even before Lark got there. The owner was Maudie Antoinette, who made one variety of bread, domed peasant loaves that rose all night to be baked in the morning, creamy inside with a dark crust that looked split by lightning. It made a meal by itself or with whatever else you had. The story is that Maudie fell in love decades earlier with a Spanish baker and surfer who imparted this recipe, then vanished. The note he left said, "I am returning to Europe before it closes." Maudie made 40 or 50 loaves a day. Hers was the only place in town people lined up outside. She had a blunt, benevolent face and the most defined forearms I ever saw. This is how Lark got involved. We had been in town less than a year. One morning she bought the last loaf, and Maudie, musing at her own hard work and tiny profits, referred to herself as Gimple the Fool. Of course, Lark knew the bread-baking hero of the old story, and from then on, the two of them were friends. There followed evenings in which they compiled lists of cherished books. Some I had heard of, most not. Maudie also had a barter arrangement with a local distiller named Dodge, so these evenings got mawkish and boisterous. One night I dragged in late from an upshore gig, and Maudie was still there, pink and giddy with the news that Lark had agreed to sell used books at her bakery. One small shelf to start with. It felt exciting, precarious. They really just wanted an excuse to hang out mornings with the smell of fresh bread. But I knew firsthand the sway of Lark. Properly wound up, her voice rippled, her eyes threw signs and portents. I remember a phrase, agent provocateur. One shelf became two, then a wall, then 8-foot rolling racks from a shut library in Hayward, Wisconsin. Maudie suggested changing the shop name to reflect its inventory. Bread and books, loaves and lit, pulp and provender. Lark laughed. She laughed off the idea. She said, all of it was bread. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leif. This has been a real delight to talk to you here tonight. I've learned some things, and it's nourishing. Let's just put it that way.
Thanks. What a pleasure.
Yeah. Bring up the lights if we could, and if you have a question, there are microphone stands. There were. Yes, they are. And come forward.
Good evening, and welcome back.
Thank you.
I was fascinated about the story of writing a book that you were so displeased with, you destroyed it.
Yeah.
It reminded me of an obscure writer who was living in a small trailer. He was working as a teacher during the day and writing at night. Finished his first book, and he was so disgusted with it, he threw it in the trash. And Tabitha King, his wife, retrieved it, and it was Carrie.
Wow.
Did you know about the story?
I don't know that story. I'm so glad to hear it, though.
Yeah.
Is that really what happened?
Yes. Oh, well, according to him.
My gosh, that's a great story.
Yeah.
Wow. No, I didn't know it, but I'm so glad you told me.
If you had, you may have, reconsidered it or something.
Yeah.
Thank you, Isaiah.
I'm going to think about that one for a while.
That's great. I can't follow that, Isaiah. That's great. Well, fellow Norwegian, ancestors from International Falls, Minnesota.
Hey.
So welcome to Traverse City.
Thank you.
It's a little balmier here than it is there.
Yeah, I'll say.
I'm also a fan of dystopian fiction,
Yeah.
and I've had to put it away
Yeah.
in this
I understand
time. And I'm just curious about your work is so interwoven with community and love and magic
Yeah.
and what's possible. And I'm wondering what words of wisdom you have for us to get through the next 3.5 years.
Well, that's a small ask. But here's what I think our neighbors are going to be important to us. I think they are. I was talking to our next door neighbors a couple of days ago, and we're just planning for the summer to have backyard bonfires. We're going to get together. We're going to have soup in the backyard. We're going to have soup nights on the regular. It's a neighborhood full of people who so far don't know each other all that well for the most part. But what I have found is just walking around has been, people want to know who their neighbors are now in a way I don't remember happening before. And so that encourages me a lot. I think just getting to know each other is going to be important. I've been writing about neighbor-type relationships in my books for a long time. And I think part of the reason is I never really had it, and I wanted it badly. Like Robin said, what can we do to get those friends? I think we're about to find out that friends are important. I know that I'm not looking forward to the next 3 years, but I'm confident that we're going to find our ways through. I am. And I think books are going to matter too.
I absolutely agree. And that idea of community and mutual aid and understanding, regardless of where we come from on the political spectrum, is just so important
regardless.
in this time, right?
And also, look, there are really one of my friends. This happened just before Cheerfully came out. I was out shoveling snow. Actually, it was about a year before it came out. I was shoveling, and there was a guy at the next house that didn't live there and who was shoveling the walk. And I said, "What's going on here? You're shoveling." And he said, "Well, yeah, the people are gone, and I'm going to go inside and paint their house. They've hired me to paint." And so we got to talking, and he gave me his card because I thought I'd like to know a painter, and it said painting and music. And I said, "You're a musician?" He said, "I'm a guitar player, and I do a lot of gigs." I said, "Wait, you're a Duluth house painter and musician?" And he said, "Yeah, so?" I said, "I just wrote a long story about somebody just like you." And so we got to talking, and we had all these points of commonality. It's like our birthday is the same day. Rainey in the story had a band called Red Dog. My friend Jamie had a band called Wet Dog. It was very funny and very serendipitous. And so now we're kind of pals, we get together, and he's a great musician. He's played for a couple of my book events. He is just, he's close by. He can come over and play. I think we get together, we play music, we eat soup, we read books. It's going to be fine. I got together with Jamie right after the election, and I said, "Are you worried?" And he said, "Well, on the one hand, yeah." He said, "On the other hand, we can eat this for breakfast." And I thought, wow, that's overconfident. But I liked it. Thank you for asking that question.
Over here, please.
Hi. I spent the weekend reading I Cheerfully Refused and really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. I am a midwife, and I feel like having a baby is our greatest, most revolutionary act. We were talking about babies earlier, of hope for the future. And I just want to talk a little bit more about your character. I don't know if you pronounce her Sol or Saul.
Soul.
Soul. Okay.
Yeah.
About her character, because I loved her so much. She's kind of the part that stood out the most for me.
Yeah, thank
kind
you.
of the like young version of all the women that would be called witches now.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I loved her so much. So if you could just tell me why you included her and
There had to be a child.
Yeah.
I mean, there had to be a child. There weren't any children in the story until that point, and so I knew one was coming. I am not good at plotting, so I don't make outlines. But I understood that a child was coming. Boy or girl, I didn't know. But there's a scene just before she appears when Rainey is in his boat, Flower, and he gets blown across Lake Superior in a 3-day storm. And it's very harrowing what he lives through. And then he washes up near, that town, which in my imagination is kind of where Ontonagon is. And he washes up there, and the first thing he sees is this scrawny, sort of heron-like girl wading through the shallows with a fishing spear. She's trying to catch a fish. And as soon as I saw her wading in the shallows, I thought, here we go. That's what I needed. I needed that at the moment because there's something so incredibly and inherently hopeful about a little kid of a certain age moving independently and looking for fish in the shallows. That was just instantly, that was a dose of hope. It was like an injection. And then I felt that she sort of swept away the next section of story. She just sort of took it from out of my hands. I turn out to really like writing about little girls. In my first book, there's a girl named Swede who was practically a secret weapon for me in that story. If I didn't know what to do, I just brought Swede in and let her talk for a while. And she had such an interesting voice to me. And then this girl was a little bit like that, except Swede was hyper literate for a little kid and wrote rhyming poetry with kind of a thumping meter and heroic outlaws and so forth. And this girl is the opposite. She's illiterate. She looks at words and sees witchcraft. She doesn't trust herself to touch a pencil. It's like people are doing something they shouldn't be doing if they're making words. And so Soul was a little bit more of a challenge, and yet what she shares with that earlier character is this indomitable spirit, this bravery. There's a scene where she there's kind of a bridge troll in this book, and after they've gotten past the bridge successfully, she goes off and takes her revenge on the troll. Oh God, I loved her for that. There are I always try to love my characters, but there are some I just can't get there, man. And then bad things might happen to them. But I loved Soul. I felt like she was. There's a great moment for her later on, and she too is on the medicine ship and held captive, and terrible things are going to happen to her there. If the story is allowed to, proceed on the terms that Warwick would dictate. But instead, there's a scene where Rainey is starting to wonder what's going on with Soul. He's being held in a separate place. And Soul gets him a note. And on this folded piece of paper, it just says, Soul. She has become brave enough to write her name. He taught her the letters back when they were on Flower together, and she writes her name. And that was such a nice surprise to me that happened. That wasn't one of those things I saw coming. Most of this I can see coming when I'm a few pages out, but that was just like a spontaneous surprise, and it was this joyful thing. I was so delighted. I didn't tear up, but I came close. And Rainey felt then reassured and happy. Thank you for letting me talk about Soul.
Thank you. She was my favorite part.
I adored writing that character.
Likewise.
Thank you. We have time for a few more over here.
First, Doug, I want to say I've been to many of these, either virtually or in person. You are the best interviewer I have heard. It was
Thank you.
fabulous.
Just make it easy. He makes it easy.
Well, that's part of it,
This has been
but
fun.
you really are
Doug,
great
you are good at
with
this. You should do more of it.
interaction. Yeah.
Don't you think Leif should come back and do an interview himself? Would you like to see him back here?
And then I want to go back to Peace Like a River. I read it shortly after it came out, and I really revered that book.
Thank you.
I just, you
Thank you
all
so
should
much.
read it if you have not. But the part about it that really spoke to me, it is the best picture of heaven I have ever read.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you can talk more about that.
Sure.
View
Yeah,
of
there's
heaven?
a scene that you're referring to, the next to the last chapter, where Reuben essentially dies and crosses over into the next life, and we follow him there. And so we see a bit of what he sees. And I was very loath to attempt that because I myself have not been past the door of death. And I thought, what if I get it wrong? And I actually called my brother Len, who's been a novelist longer than I have, and told him what I was thinking about. And I wanted to just sort of test the idea out on him. And he said, well, I think you ought to try it. He said, look, don't overthink this. Just go ahead, do it the best you can. If it doesn't work, just reinvent. You can always just reimagine something, imagine it over again. And you know that sometimes you just need the simplest advice. And that was so wise because it took the pressure off. I thought, well, I'll just try this. I had built it up into something dangerous, into something that I wasn't sure I dared to try. And instead I tried it, and it really did come easily. It came very quickly. I wrote that scene in a couple of days, and it felt, you know, there were some nice surprises in it. I don't know if there's an afterlife or not. If there is, I hope it's kind of like that. But who knows? I guess we'll all find out, won't we?
I hope you got it right.
It was lovely to write. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to, I have not read your book. Is this too loud? Is it okay?
You're good.
Okay. What I wanted to ask you is when you write fiction, do you have the characters like constantly living in your head, even when you're not writing and you're sleeping and you're thinking, oh my God, he should be doing this? And
Yeah.
I find like my brain does not shut down. I just finished my first fiction book.
Congratulations.
And it's scary, because it's scary.
That's fantastic.
And so I wrote a couple books before that. But anyway, I just wanted to try fiction. And so I wrote about my grandmother that I've never met. And she will not go away. She's there.
She's still in
every
there.
Every day, all day. And I feel like, do I go back? I mean, I hear this woman, not hear her, but I know, no. Go this way. Have you ever had a character live in your head?
You know, they managed to stick around for a while after the book is finished. But then what happens is, because I'm a serial practitioner, they start to make way. And there's a little bit of an overlap. There's a little bit of a Venn diagram when the characters from, Virgil sort of bump into and have conversations with the characters from Cheerfully. And that's kind of an interesting thing. But then gradually the former recedes. Probably what you need to do is start another one.
I'm thinking that.
And
Actually,
that'll
that's what I
chase
was
her
thinking,
out.
Because I just can't. That'll get me around for sure.
That'll exercise her.
Okay. That's what I'll do. Start another one.
Yeah.
One more quick question. Do
Yeah.
you read anyone else's work when you're writing?
I have to, because I'm so slow that otherwise I would never read. I do. I read. I read quite voraciously. But there are certain it's a good question, because there are certain writers I won't read while I'm doing first draft. I will not read Garcia Marquez while I'm doing first draft, because his style is so much of what it is that I find myself falling into those rhythms and adopting those things that are uniquely his.
Yeah.
Or Cormac McCarthy, the same thing. It's like, what's the difference between Cormac McCarthy and the Old Testament? Not a lot, man. And I can't read him without sort of falling under his sway, and starting to write like long sentences that that have great import. And, my shoulders just aren't wide enough to carry that. So I don't read him while I'm doing my own first drafts, but I read him for pleasure after I'm done.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your
Thank
questions.
you. Last question here. Yes, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Sydney.
Hi, Leif. Do you prefer to write happy or sad endings? And do you prefer to read happy or sad endings?
Oh, wow. The best ending for me kind of splits the difference. Do you know what I mean? I don't know that I would characterize any of my endings as undilutedly happy, but I do I can't write an ending that is despairing. I can't do it. That would leave me in a bad frame of mind. And I don't like reading books that are despairing either. But sometimes I think maybe my definition is a little bit different, because I talked to my agent about The Road, talking of McCarthy. And she's like, oh man, I just went out on the streets of New York and sat in a lawn chair for a week and waited for the world to end. And I thought,
This
wow.
is the novel The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
The Road by Cormac, yeah. And I guess that's a very, very dark book. I was so happy when I was reading it. I don't know why. It made me really happy. And the ending I felt was kind of beautiful. And it didn't make me feel hopeless at all. It made me feel like, no, they're carrying the fire.
I'm reading the book right now. Don't tell me anything.
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. Didn't mean to screw that up for you. No, I don't go for just the pure happy, because that doesn't seem quite honest to me, really. It has to be a mix of the two, because that's life itself. And that is enough for me to feel like getting up and going on. Yeah. Thank you.
Sydney is one of the students in the writer's studio. Yes. Keep it up. Keep writing.
Thank you for your time.
Well, listen, this brings us to the end. It's been delightful.
Yeah, thanks, Doug.
Thank you so
Been a lot
much
of
for
fun.
bringing your stories forward to this stage.
Yeah. Well, I'm delighted to have been here, and thank every one of you for coming out. This has been really a fun evening.
You'll come back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Do we,
Thank you for joining us
if
for
I could just say this National Writer Series.
National Writer Series. Coming up Thursday, May 1st at 7 p.m., don't miss an evening with Alua Arthur. Join the National Writer Series for an inspiring conversation with New York Times bestselling author and our country's leading death doula, Alua Arthur. Arthur's deeply transformative memoir, Briefly Perfectly Human, Making an Authentic Life by Getting Real About the End, reframes how we think about death and how it can help us lead better, more fulfilling, and authentic lives. Praised by author Jodi Picoult, who called it a truly unique, inspiring perspective on the time we have, what we do with it, and how we let go of this world. There is no one I'd trust more to guide me through an understanding of death and how it informs life. Tickets are available now. Go to nationalwriterseries.org.